Today's lesson can be summarized in the following highlights: Jonathan's daring plan, Israel defeats the Philistines, Saul's foolish oath, and Saul's military successes. So, let's get into the text. One day, Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Come on, let's go over to where the Philistines have their outpost." Now note, this was not foolishness, but courage. However, Jonathan did not tell his father what he was doing. Meanwhile, Saul and his 600 men, now remember in the previous chapter it was mentioned that Saul had 3,000, but he had a lot of people run, were camped on the outskirts of Gibeah, around the pomegranate tree at Migron. Among Saul's men were Ahijah the priest, who was wearing the ephod, the priestly vest. Ahijah was the son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord who had served at Shiloh. Okay, remember with me back to chapter 4. The ark is captured. Eli falls backward, breaking his neck, and dies. The wife of Phinehas gives birth, and she names him Ichabod, which means the glory has departed. Okay, back to the scripture. No one realized that Jonathan had left the Israelite camp. To reach the Philistine outpost, Jonathan had to go down between two rocky cliffs that were called Bozez and Seneh. Remember those names. The cliff on the north was in front of Michmash, and the one on the south was in front of Geba. "Let's go across to the outpost of those pagans," Jonathan said to his armor-bearer. "Perhaps the Lord will help us, for nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win the battle whether he has many warriors or only a few." Just like verse 1, this is not foolishness. This time it's faith. "Do what you think is best," the armor-bearer replied. "I'm with you completely, whatever you decide." And this is commitment. "All right then," Jonathan told him, "we will cross over and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Stay where you are or we'll kill you,' then we will stop and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come on up and fight,' then we will go up. That will be the Lord's sign that he will help us defeat them." So when the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, "Look, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes." Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, "Come on up here, and we'll teach you a lesson." "Come on, climb right behind me," Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "for the Lord will help us defeat them." So they climbed up using both hands and feet, and the Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer killed those who came behind them. They killed some 20 men in all, and their bodies were scattered over about half an acre. Suddenly panic broke out in the Philistine army, both in the camp and in the field, including even the outpost and the raiding parties. And just then, an earthquake struck, and everyone was terrified. Saul's lookouts in Gibeah of Benjamin saw a strange sight. The vast army of Philistines began to melt away in every direction. Now remember, in the previous chapter, we're told the Philistine army included 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and as many warriors as the grains of sand on the seashore. It was a huge army. "Call the roll and find out who's missing," Saul ordered. And when they checked, they found that Jonathan and his armor-bearer were gone. Then Saul shouted to Ahijah, "Bring the ephod here." For at that time Ahijah was wearing the ephod in front of the Israelites. Now, some translations say, "Bring the ark of God." We'll talk about that discrepancy in just a couple of minutes. But while Saul was talking to the priest, the confusion in the Philistine camp grew louder and louder. So Saul said to the priest, "Never mind, let's get going." Other translations say, "Withdraw your hand." This would most likely refer to the use of the Urim and Thummim stones used during this phase of history to determine the will of God. Then Saul and all his men rushed out to the battle and found the Philistines killing each other. There was terrible confusion everywhere. Even the Hebrews who had previously gone over to the Philistine army revolted and joined in with Saul, Jonathan, and the rest of the Israelites. Likewise, the men of Israel who were hiding in the hill country of Ephraim joined the chase when they saw the Philistines running away. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle continued to rage even beyond Bethaven. Now the men of Israel were pressed to exhaustion that day because Saul had placed them under an oath, saying, "Let a curse fall on anyone who eats before evening, before I have full revenge on my enemies." So no one ate anything all day, even though they had found honeycomb on the ground in the forest. They didn't dare touch the honey because they all feared the oath they had taken. But Jonathan had not heard his father's command, and he dipped the end of his stick into a piece of honeycomb and ate the honey. After he had eaten it, he felt refreshed. But one of the men saw him and said, "Your father made the army take a strict oath that anyone who eats food today will be cursed. That's why everyone is weary and faint." "My father has made trouble for us all," Jonathan exclaimed. "A command like that only hurts us. See how refreshed I am now that I have eaten this little bit of honey." If the men had been allowed to eat freely from the food they found among our enemies, think how many more Philistines we could have killed. They chased and killed the Philistines all day from Michmash to Aijalon, growing more and more faint. That evening they rushed for the battle plunder and butchered the sheep, goats, cattle, and calves, but they ate them without draining the blood. Now this was in violation of God's command. In Leviticus 17, they're instructed, "Pour out its blood and cover it with earth when they hunt and kill an animal for food." Also in Deuteronomy 12, "You must not eat the blood. Pour it on the ground like water." Someone reported to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that still has blood in it." "That's very wrong," Saul said. "Find a large stone and roll it over here. Then go out among the troops and tell them, 'Bring the cattle, sheep, and goats here to me. Kill them here and drain the blood before you eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with the blood still in it." So that night all the troops brought their animals and slaughtered them there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first of the altars he built to the Lord. Then Saul said, "Let's chase the Philistines all night and plunder them until sunrise. Let's destroy every last one of them." His men replied, "We'll do whatever you think is best." But the priest said, Let's ask God first." So Saul asked God, "Should we go after the Philistines? Will you help us defeat them?" But God made no reply that day. Remember this. That's a topic of discussion a little bit later. Then Saul said to the leaders, "Something is wrong. I want all my army commanders to come here. We must find out what sin was committed today. I vow by the name of the Lord who rescued Israel that the sinner will surely die, even if it is my own son Jonathan." But no one would tell him what the trouble was. Then Saul said, "Jonathan and I will stand over here, and all the rest of you stand over there." And the people responded to Saul, "Whatever you think is best." Then Saul prayed, "O Lord, God of Israel, please show us who is guilty and who is innocent." Then they cast the sacred lots, and Jonathan and Saul were chosen as the guilty ones, and the people were declared innocent. Now the Greek version adds, "If the fault is with me or my son Jonathan, respond with Urim. But if the men of Israel are at fault, respond with Thummim." Okay, let's pause for a moment and talk about God's silence that's described here. First, it was divine. That is, God refused to respond because there was sin in the camp. Saul's rash oath and Jonathan's unwitting violation had brought guilt upon Israel. Secondly was the method of inquiry mentioned here. In that time, answers usually came through the priest with the Urim and Thummim in the ephod. Silence meant God withheld guidance. And theologically, Saul as king had failed in spiritual leadership. His impulsive vow hindered God's blessing and almost cost Jonathan's life. Then Saul said, "Now cast lots again and choose between me and Jonathan." And Jonathan was shown to be the guilty one. "Tell me what you have done," Saul demanded of Jonathan. "I tasted a little honey," Jonathan admitted. "It was only a little bit on the end of my stick. Does that deserve death?" "Yes, Jonathan," Saul said, "you must surely die. May God strike me and even kill me if you do not die for this." But the people broke in and said to Saul, "Jonathan has won this great victory for Israel. Should he die? Far from it. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair on his head will be touched, for God helped him do a great deed today." So the people rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul called back the army from chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines returned home. Now when Saul had secured his grasp on Israel's throne, he fought against his enemies in every direction, against Moab, Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines, and wherever he turned, he was victorious. He performed great deeds and conquered the Amalekites, saving Israel from all those who had plundered them. Saul's sons included Jonathan, Ishbosheth, and Malchishua. He also had two daughters, Merab, who was older, and Michal. Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. The commander of Saul's army was Abner, the son of Saul's uncle Ner. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were both sons of Abiel. The Israelites fought constantly with the Philistines throughout Saul's lifetime. So, whenever Saul observed a young man who was brave and strong, he drafted him into his army. Let's take a look at a few observations in this text. The garrison mentioned was a permanent military presence, often placed in a strategic location to enforce domination, collect tribute, that is taxes, and suppress rebellion. Jonathan's attack on this outpost was significant because it was essentially striking at the visible symbol of Philistine occupation in Israel. But remember, each of the slopes had a name. In verse 4, the names of the slopes on each side were Bozez, meaning slippery, and Sena, meaning thorny. So the slopes leading up to the garrison were both slippery and thorny, making it a formidable approach. But even in the first part of this chapter, we see a character difference in Jonathan and Saul. Jonathan shows faith, courage, and initiative. He goes with only his armor bearer against overwhelming odds, believing nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. His trust is not reckless self-confidence, but confidence in God's power. He acts decisively, seeking a sign from the Lord, and his boldness sparks a chain reaction that leads to Israel's victory. This reflects a man of dependence on God, leadership by faith, and willingness to act even when success looks impossible. On the other hand, Saul, meanwhile, is pictured as hesitant and passive. He remains under a pomegranate tree at Migron with about 600 men. Instead of taking initiative as king and military leader, he's stationary, waiting, and seemingly unsure. Later in the chapter, when the battle turns, Saul's actions, that is, calling for the ark or ephod, then stopping, making a rash vow about fasting, that all shows him as reactionary, impulsive, and more concerned with procedure or appearances than with discerning God's will. And his posture under the tree can be read as symbolic of his indecisiveness and lack of spiritual clarity, in contrast to Jonathan's forward-moving faith. A brief summary reveals Jonathan embodies the kind of leadership by trust in God that Saul lacks. Jonathan takes risks for God's honor, while Saul hesitates and makes rash or misguided choices. As you look at Jonathan and Saul, you'll notice that Jonathan was on the move. Saul was sitting still. And who was Ahijah? Follow his genealogy with me. Son of Ahitub, brother of Ichabod. Remember him? Son of Phinehas, son of Eli. So here's Israel's leaders at this point. Saul, whose kingship has been rejected. Ahijah, whose priestly line has been rejected. And Samuel, who at this point has left. Now remember, I talked about verse 18 and a question about translation, whether it should read ephod or ark of God. Well, let's talk about it for a moment. Variations in the text translation show that some Hebrew manuscripts and translations say ephod instead of ark. The ephod was a priestly garment with the Urim and Thummim used for seeking God's guidance. And because the ark was usually at Kiriath Jearim during this time, David had not brought it to Jerusalem at this point. Many scholars think that ephod is the more accurate reading. Also, when you read the passage in context, if it's the ark, Saul wanted the symbol of God's presence brought forward for divine direction before deciding whether to engage the Philistines. If it's the ephod, Saul was calling the priest, Ahijah, who is mentioned wearing the ephod in verse 3, to consult God about the next step. But in contrast with Jonathan, you'll see Jonathan acted in faith, trusting that the Lord could save by many or by few. But Saul hesitated, relying on ritual consultation and external symbols before acting. So 1 Samuel 14, verse 18, in conclusion, tells us that reference to the ephod is the more historically accurate. But the important point is that Saul, unlike Jonathan, sought security in religious objects or procedures instead of decisive trust in God. Courage coupled with faith. The Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few. Jonathan's statement is not mere optimism. It's true faith, and there is a major difference. Faith can rise up even when there seems to be no reason for optimism. Optimism is rooted in the perception of a situation. Faith is rooted in God alone. Zechariah chapter 4 verse 10 reminds us to not despise the day of small things. It's an encouragement to place our faith in God and the fulfillment of His divine purpose, not focusing on the size or strength of our accomplishments. Jonathan said, "Perhaps the Lord will work for us." This acknowledges the power of God, but restrains presumption. And God confirms the go-ahead, and Jonathan's attack results in terror and confusion of the enemy. The bottom line is found in verse 23. So the Lord delivered Israel that day. Let's look at Saul versus Jonathan, 7 aspects of comparison. In their attitude towards God, Saul was hesitant, formal, and fearful, relying on rituals more than real trust. Jonathan responded in bold faith. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving. In leadership style, Saul was rash, authoritarian, and self-preserving, whereas Jonathan was humble, courageous, and trusted in God's guidance. When they found themselves in battle, Saul stayed under a tree with 600 men, waiting, and reacted late. But Jonathan took the initiative with just his armor bearer to attack the Philistines. As they looked at religion, Saul called for the ark or ephod, but abandoned it when impatient. Jonathan sought a confirming sign, but acted from confidence in God's power. And how did they treat their soldiers? Saul burdened them with a rash oath to fast, weakening them in battle. Jonathan encouraged them with faith, strengthened the people through his example. And their impact on the outcome? Saul nearly cost Israel's strength and his son's life. Jonathan sparked the victory. His faith caused Philistines panic and inspired Israel. And when it comes to relationship to people, Saul lost credibility. People resisted his command to execute Jonathan. But Jonathan was loved and defended by the people. They saved him from Saul's oath. Here's some food for thought. Let me challenge you with a few observations and subsequent questions. Take a moment and ponder how you would answer each of the following. How are we impulsive like Saul when we should totally trust God like Jonathan? Faith does not dictate to God, but it's consistently obvious that He honors our faith in Him. How have you found this to be true in your life? Jonathan is showing amazing leadership abilities. He would seem to be the natural, logical choice to follow Saul. After all, he was the prince, but that wasn't God's plan. So, why did he never get the opportunity when he seemed to have the ability? How did he react to God's chosen? Dale Davis is quoted as saying, "For Jonathan, the kingdom was not his to seize, not his to rule, but his to serve." If it were you, how would you handle this destiny? And finally, how does life seem to hand you this destiny today? You see, the contrast is clear. Saul is fear-driven, rash, and insecure. Jonathan is faith-driven, courageous, and God-dependent. Which example will you follow?